The following day, I found $48,700 in hotel luxury charges and 2 London tickets for her lover on it. A week later, she returned, boasting about the spa trip. I chuckled because, using my bullshit radar, which is a honed skill from tracking digital thieves over 15 years, I sensed something fishy. It's like having an extra sense, but instead of seeing ghosts, I detect patterns, inconsistencies, rehearsed narratives, and insincere smiles. That specific Tuesday morning, my radar was going off wildly. I was in the shower, humming a tune that had been stuck in my head since the grocery store the day before. You know the feeling, it's usually from an advertisement about yogurt or car insurance, when the bathroom door creaked open. In our relationship that had lasted long enough, privacy in the bathroom was more of a suggestion than a rule, so I didn't give it much thought initially. Perhaps she needed her hairbrush, maybe she was searching for her makeup bag, just typical married couple activities, right? Dead wrong. Through the frosted glass shower door, I saw her silhouette and she wasn't reaching for her makeup bag. Instead, she was rummaging in my gym bag, that old black Nike duffel I've been using since college because, truthfully, why repair something that isn't broken? She wasn't casually searching, but rifling through it, like a raccoon going through trash at 3 in the morning, only this was far more calculated and adorably less so. I stood under the hot water with shampoo still in my hair, watching this scene unfold as if in a nature documentary. Occasionally, time seems to slow, and you find yourself observing yourself from beyond your own self. Exactly that happened. A part of me felt like laughing, another wanted to storm out and inquire about her actions. However, the practical part, the one responsible for paying the mortgage, silently advised, "Marcus, keep quiet, observe, learn." So I observed. She withdrew my wallet, then my passport. She paused, holding the passport as if measuring or examining it meticulously. Her countenance was unusual, not guilt, not panic, but intense concentration, as if solving a complex mathematical problem, and my identity documents were variables required for her calculations. I shut off the shower, took my towel, and exited casually, like one might after discovering their dog rummaging through the trash. You know, that deceptive, "Hey, what's up?" tone that everyone sees right through yet acts as if all is well. "Hey, love," I said, drying my hair with a towel while my entire system was on high alert. "Found something." Claire looked up, and here's the odd part. She smiled, not a sheepish or caught in the act smile, but a sincere, friendly, "Hi, sweetheart" kind of smile that would have earned her an Academy Award if this were a movie. She displayed my passport and said, "Just verifying if you still had the hardware store receipt from last week, the one for the shelf brackets. I need to return the incorrect screws. You know, the receipt in your passport." "Yeah, right, because that's absolutely where normal people keep their receipts for shelf brackets, not in their wallet or kitchen junk drawer, but tucked between pages of an official government document." Her reasoning seemed paper-thin, suitable for straining coffee. "Indeed," I replied, echoing her enthusiasm with an Oscar-caliber act. "Funny you should mention it, as I discarded that very item yesterday, my apologies." She nonchalantly returned my passport to the bag. Intriguingly, I marked the spot where she'd found it and gave her a cheek peck before exiting the bathroom. "Don't sweat it," she said. "I'll just make a meal of the $5." $5? She queried. "Of course, for you've shown concern over such trivial returns before." That same person who splurged $70 on an artisanal, handcrafted candle by monks in Vermont, or some equivalent marketing gimmick, was I. In the bathroom, with water trickling from my hair onto the tiles, I had to force myself not to chuckle. Not because it was amusing, though there was a grim humor in it, but because laughter would imply acknowledging something was awry. I hadn't planned to reveal my identity just yet, but since we seemed destined to share this tumultuous voyage, allow me to introduce myself. I am Marcus Hale. At 38 years of age, I should perhaps have learned better by now, but here I am, seemingly still unheedful of the perilous signs in relationships. As a career hunter of electronic crooks, credit card fraudsters, and identity thieves, those who overestimate their criminal cunning while underestimating their own idiocy. Despite their extravagant tastes and lack of self-restraint, I have found gainful employment as a fraud analyst for a private security agency. Prior to this, I served in the FBI's cybercrimes unit, a role I left behind due to the prospect of earning double the income in the private sector and avoiding the bureaucratic sluggishness that resembles a DMV on a Monday morning. Pattern recognition is my daily meal. Each day, I rise, brew my coffee, and my mind begins sorting data points, a habit honed through years of skill, making me exceptionally proficient in my work. Yet, the predicament with Claire was an extraordinary disaster because every professional warning sign flashed like a fire station during rush hour. However, what struck me wasn't guilt on her face when she left the shower, but calculation and comfort signs of someone who had orchestrated similar events before, someone with a strategy. I dressed, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table as Claire hummed in the bedroom preparing for her day, and I decided I wouldn't challenge her yet, not immediately, because if my 15 years of chasing thieves have taught me anything, it's this. To catch someone in the act, you don't spook them off. You supply the rope. You observe as they weave it into a noose. You let them believe they're succeeding. So I planted a trap, not a physical one, but a cleverly designed one. A tempting, alluring, impossible to resist trap. In my wallet, I had a prepaid card, the reloadable kind I use for purchases that don't involve my primary accounts. I swapped it with another card, this time a lure card, brand new, unused, untouched. I'd prepped it earlier in the day. Sipping coffee and listening to Claire singing in the bedroom, seeming content, I indulged in a tiny joke to keep my spirits up. If she ever spends my money on something I can't even pronounce, I thought aloud, I'll return it and make her pay for the dictionary. The house was filled with a sense of peace. The sun streamed through the kitchen window. Claire emerged in her favorite sundress, kissed me on the head, and mentioned a lunch date with Jennifer. Everything appeared ordinary, everything felt ordinary. My strategy was unconventional. It was precise, ruthless, and meticulously constructed. After observing people squander their lives due to avarice and folly for 15 years, I wasn't going to let it happen to me without cataloging every move meticulously. As Claire departed, I offered her a friendly farewell, behaving like an attentive spouse, then returned to my laptop to assemble the most intricate trap I'd ever devised. Not for an outsider or a faceless criminal hidden behind an IP address. For my wife. Living with someone for 7 years reveals patterns. You start noticing questions. Not the everyday, how was your day? Or, did you remember to get milk? Types of queries. Instead, I'm referring to the curiously specific, oddly timed, casually suspicious questions that make you ponder whether you're engaged in a conversation or being interrogated by someone who has watched too many crime documentaries on Netflix. Claire had frequently shown interest in my line of work, initially appearing charming. She often inquired about cases I could discuss without breaching numerous confidentiality agreements or potentially committing a federal offense. During meals, she'd listen intently, her eyes sparkling with fascination as I explained the intricacies of credit card fraud networks, the strategies employed by identity thieves to amass their portfolios, and how one could deplete an account in another country without leaving a traceable digital footprint. She enjoyed the detective aspects, finding pleasure in the problem-solving nature of it all. At the time, she nodded as if absorbing the information, asking insightful questions that suggested genuine curiosity. However, reflecting now with hindsight's clarity and a touch of suspicion, I understand that her interest wasn't merely casual. She was gathering intelligence, learning the ropes like a spy preparing for an operation. However, it seemed my assignment was draining my finances while she enjoyed the luxury lifestyle at my expense. The inquiries had evolved over time. They became more technical, more detailed, less fascinating, and more, well, but how does that function? Approximately half a year ago, or possibly longer, she started asking questions such as how quickly do banks actually identify suspicious transactions, what transpires when a card is used abroad, and my personal favorite, are real-time fraud alerts effective, or is there a delay? At the moment, I responded as the gullible individual I apparently was. I described that most banks now have advanced algorithms, international transactions certainly trigger flags. I mentioned there's usually a slight delay, but nothing significant, perhaps a few minutes to an hour, contingent on the system. I had explained fraud detection to her as if I were a professor lecturing an attentive student, unaware that I was essentially teaching a course titled The Art of Deceiving Your Spouse. And then there was Jenna. Jenna, Claire's friend since college. The type of woman who could make you feel financially inadequate just by her presence. Jenna, with her meticulously curated Instagram showcasing lavish getaways to destinations I can hardly pronounce and eateries where the menus don't list prices, because, if one has to inquire, they clearly don't belong there. Jenna, who owned designer bags that cost more than my monthly car payment, and mentioned casually that she would be jetting off to Paris for a weekend as easily as others might pop over to Target for paper towels. Claire adored her. I speak without hyperbole. Her admiration was bordering on worship. She would spend hours scrolling through Jenna's Instagram posts featuring tropical paradises, luxurious hotels, and champagne brunches. I would observe this expression on her face, a blend of yearning, envy, and the potentially hazardous desire that pushes people into irrational actions. She'd occasionally make remarks such as, "It must be wonderful to travel so freely," or, "I wonder what life is like without financial stress," which left me perplexed, given our comfortable situation. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't in dire straits either. We owned a pleasant house, drove decent cars, enjoyed dining out and taking vacations. We were comfortably middle class, living the typical American lifestyle, or whatever term you prefer. However, it seemed that this wasn't enough to satisfy her. Not when Jenna was living as if she were a character from an extravagant lifestyle blog. The hints began about a year ago, subtly at first. Claire would comment on how Jenna never appeared to be burdened by credit card bills, how she always had funds for whatever she desired, how she'd jest about having mystical cards that never reached their limit. Initially, I believed Jenna must have wealth through inheritance, marriage, or trust funds. Her financial status wasn't my concern, as I had my own matters to handle. Now, however, I'm questioning if Claire's praise was more about envy than admiration. Perhaps she was examining a plan for an upgraded lifestyle she couldn't legally afford, so she was investigating alternative routes. Following the bathroom incident, let's call it what it was, I found my wife rummaging through my passport as if a thief casing a joint. To verify my suspicions, I designed a test, a trap so intricate that in a heist movie, it would be stolen and made into millions. I created the bait high quality, luxury bait that could even make an honest person ponder their moral code. I established a new credit card account, setting up my experiment. Instead of my primary bank, I chose another institution for business-related expenditures. I deposited $57,000 into it. Yes, you read that correctly. That's $57,000. A sum that could make anyone forget their caution and embark on a long vacation to a distant place. It was a blend of my personal funds and a credit line available for work-related purposes, all above board and legitimate. I then activated every possible safety feature offered by contemporary banking: GPS tracking for each transaction, advanced identification protocols, international purchase alerts, flags for unusual spending patterns, time of day notifications, you name it. If technology permitted, I could have even set up an alert for magnetic strip usage. The card was equipped like a Christmas tree adorned by security-obsessed experts. Ironically, this resembles my personality. I keep the card in my everyday bag, unconcealed. Not concealed in some hidden crevice, but rather openly situated in the wallet's compartment, easily accessible for anyone rummaging through my belongings, such as a questioning spouse searching for hardware store bills. It was fresh and polished, bearing my name with that pretentious metallic font that gives an air of significance. It seemed to proclaim, "Employ me." I waited then, grinning. I grinned like a man who had secreted the last piece of cake in his underwear drawer, anticipating the one who would seek it. If Claire was innocent and my suspicion merely paranoia, nothing would unfold. The card would remain unused, and we'd resume our ordinary lives. But if I were correct, if my intuition served me right, and Claire harbored intentions, then this card was about to take center stage in a case that would make my professional achievements appear novice-like. To alleviate the strangeness, I entertained myself with jokes. At my work desk, I pondered. If she squanders it on a spa retreat, perhaps she'll get massages for her remorse. Perhaps there are forgiveness facials or conscience-purifying deep tissue therapies available. Morbid humor is what maintains sanity for people like me when our lives seem to crumble in front of us. Claire remained oblivious. She carried on with her routine days as usual. She'd bid me farewell in the morning, share updates about her day, send humorous internet memes. We'd dine together, and she'd chat about her afternoons with Jenna, about the new restaurant they visited or the store they browsed. She was the ideal wife, caring, loving, completely and utterly full of deceit, because those questions continued to haunt me. How can one monitor international transactions? What distinguishes fraud from unauthorized use? Can someone contest a charge if they claim they didn't make it? Casually inquiring yet suspiciously probing, she seemed unaware that her words sounded more like investigation than casual conversation. I remained composed, responding with a calm and instructive tone, all the while filing away each response within my mind. In my view, we were engaged in a game of chess, while to her it appeared we were merely playing checkers. However, the board was our relationship, and the pieces were our very future. Overly dramatic? Perhaps, but consider the tension when one suspects their partner is contemplating identity fraud. For 3 days, the card lay hidden in my bag as I anxiously awaited alerts that never arrived. Each moment of waiting became an exercise in self-control, as I wrestled with doubts about my sanity and whether I had allowed paranoia to cloud my judgment to the point of sabotaging my marriage. Claire's normal behavior only added fuel to the fire, making the situation all the more unsettling. Then, on the fourth day, my phone came alive with a symphony of alerts. The barrage of notifications was both exhilarating and terrifying, as if the universe were conspiring to validate my suspicions. Despite the relief I felt, it couldn't quite erase the uneasiness that had been festering within me for days. Alarm after alarm after alarm, my phone seemed to be playing a repetitive tune titled, "Someone's emptying your bank account." The chase had begun, unbeknownst to me. I had stumbled into a well-laid trap, designed by someone who'd honed his skills over 15 years, ensnaring people exactly like me. Much like the sensation of listening to a dull presentation in a meeting while your phone vibrates restlessly in your pocket, it was my Thursday afternoon that felt as though my financial surveillance system had decided to stage an uprising. I found myself in a client meeting amidst downtown's cold glass and steel structures, where everything shimmered with chrome and modern furniture appeared to be designed by those who loathe the comfort of the human spine. In place of spam calls pitching extended car warranties, it was my entire financial system in crisis. During the consultation, a medium-sized tech firm expressed concerns over potential employee expense fraud and issue, ironically contrasting my personal situation at the time. Engrossed in my familiar role as a fraud analyst, I nodded, emitted appropriate sounds, and likely uttered and absolutely, although my mind was preoccupied due to delivering this talk approximately 200 times before. My phone commenced buzzing once, twice, 3 times, 4. By the sixth buzz, I was convinced that either a catastrophe or a medical emergency had occurred, or, regrettably, Claire had discovered my prepaid card and embarked on an extravagant shopping excursion reminiscent of a financially prudent housewife. Excusing myself from the meeting with a universally recognized, "I'm sorry, but this might be urgent" expression every working professional has mastered. You recognize the type tactful yet assertive, implying that your phone matters more than our discussion on data breach precautions, though politeness prevents expressing it directly. I slipped into the corridor, extracted my phone, and felt a sinking sensation, similar to the drop experienced at the initial incline of an unwanted roller coaster ride. In less than 20 minutes, I received 11 notifications, giving the impression of a slot machine striking gold, except instead of receiving money, I was witnessing it vanish in real time. The first alert indicated a $3,200 charge at Ashton Grand. a posh hotel where even the lobby's chandelier might be pricier than my car, and the coffee is served in cups that seem to originate from a museum. Despite being familiar with the location, having driven past it countless times, I had never entered due to my preference for affordable accommodations. Second notification, wanting $450 at Serenity Spa and Wellness. It seems that following a $3,000 hotel room expense, the subsequent choice is a massage costing more than most individuals' monthly grocery bills. I envisioned Claire reclining on a warm table as someone with soothing hands and aromatic oils eased her shoulder tension. Managing fraud must be stressful indeed, requiring relief like deep tissue therapy. I found myself in that clinical office hallway illuminated by fluorescent lights, experiencing an unusual blend of emotions, certainly anger and betrayal, but also, somewhat embarrassingly, a touch of professional respect. This wasn't thoughtless shopping. This wasn't someone discovering a credit card and purchasing whatever sparkled nearby in the mall. This was calculated, premeditated, tactical. I skipped the appointment, informed the client of an unexpected family crisis, promising to rearrange our conversation later. My assistant, suspecting my behavior was odd but maintaining professionalism, relayed my regrets on my behalf. In haste, I dashed to my garage parking spot, closed and secured the car doors as if preparing for an illicit act, then accessed my phone's fraud detection platform. The details were captivating, alarming, potentially destructive, yet alluring. Each transaction bore a timestamp, geographical coordinates, merchant classifications, and even the final digits of the card employed strikingly identical to the one I had used as a decoy. I traced Claire's afternoon activities as if following a treasure map, except the prize was my funds, and the guidebook led me straight towards Betrayal Island. However, here's where it became intriguing. This wasn't merely reckless spending. The purchases followed a distinct pattern, a rhythm. The hotel bill arrived first, logical as it served as a base. Next was the spa fee, perhaps for celebration or relaxation or self-justification. Following this, about 40 minutes later, another message surfaced. It displayed 2 premium tickets to London Heathrow, set to depart in 3 days. 2 tickets, not one, implying Claire wasn't traveling alone. This wasn't a solo expedition of personal discovery, it was a joint endeavor. I scrutinized the details of the transaction, given my meticulous nature and my extensive experience in extracting every scrap of data from a purchase. The ticket acquisition stemmed from a travel reservation platform, and concealed within the merchant details were passenger particulars. 2 names emerged, one being Claire Elizabeth Hale, my spouse of 7 years, the individual who vowed to love and cherish me, seemingly viewing commitment as more of a recommendation than an obligation. The other name was Evan Garrett. Evan, with his impeccable hairstyle, finance profession, and Instagram posts depicting himself at wine tastings and golf courses. Evan, who I encountered precisely twice at dinner gatherings, both times perceiving him as the type of person who probably hit their peak in high school, yet was still reaping the benefits of that fame 2 decades later. Evan, now apparently traveling with Claire for an international scam spree orchestrated with my funds. I acted as any reasonable individual might have done in such a circumstance. I chuckled. Not a cheerful laugh. My laughter echoed in the garage, a reflex to the absurdity of reality, like a short circuit in my brain. The concrete walls and faint exhaust fumes were my only companions as I laughed until it hurt. But soon enough, I composed myself because humor only masks the pain of a wife stealing from you for so long. I needed solitude, strategy, and a plan it seemed Claire had already made hers. So I retrieved Agent Rivera's number from my contacts. We shared a history, having worked on several cases together, establishing a professional bond and mutual trust that I wasn't one to falsely cry wolf. I composed a message saying, "Wish to discuss, dealing with a confidential matter regarding fraud. Can we meet?" Her reply arrived swiftly. "Meet at office in an hour, bring proof." I navigated home before the office, for if I was to disintegrate my marriage, I wanted irrefutable evidence. I parked the car, entered the house, and made a beeline for my office. I unearthed every warning signal, snapped screenshots of each transaction, downloaded all merchant data stored in the system. I organized a folder on my desktop, labeled it Proof, as subtleties were no longer relevant. I scrutinized the rest of my accounts, ensuring thoroughness. All other activities appeared normal with no suspicious charges or abnormalities, suggesting Claire had fallen for the trap exactly as intended. In this paraphrased version, the text maintains its original meaning and length. The focus is on the actions taken by the character to gather evidence before meeting someone to discuss a personal fraud case, as well as the implication that the person they are meeting with may be involved in the fraudulent activity. Claire. She discovered the card, noticed the high limit, likely verified her account balance online, and observed the 5 zeros illuminate on her screen like a warning of poor choices, prompting her to opt for an upgrade in lifestyle at no cost. Prior to departing for Rivera's office, I performed one more action. I scrutinized the transaction history against the calendar, began examining the past few months, correlating dates. It was then that I found it, minor charges scattered about, various retailers, varying amounts, but consistently occurring during business trips or client meetings. Consistently happening when a few $100s were unnoticed here and there. This wasn't Claire's initial encounter. This was merely the first instance where she was enticed enough by the temptation I had presented. As I drove to Rivera's office, I made a self-deprecating remark because humor was the sole thing maintaining me from crashing my car into a barrier. 2 tickets to London, I mumbled. She seemed to recall our anniversary from a past decade, quite considerate of her. The city traffic was just as congested as ever. I waited at stoplights and watched pedestrians go about their daily lives, ordinary folks leading uncomplicated lives, likely unburdened by spouses planning fraudulent trips overseas. I found myself longing for their simplicity. Then, I checked the map on my tracking system one more time, observing how the dots illuminated like a celestial pattern, a game I hadn't voluntarily joined, tracing every destination where my money was spent during a meeting about expense reports. The situation wasn't lost on me, not even slightly. By the end of the day, now known as the one that turned my marriage into a federal matter, the fraud card had accumulated $48,700 in expenses, approximately $48,000 in less than 8 hours. Such expenses surpass annual salaries for most Americans, vanishing quicker than saying identity theft thrice consecutively, luxurious accommodations pricier per night compared to my initial vehicle purchase, dining at restaurants where wait staff likely have superior dental coverage, impromptu retail splurges at locations lacking price tags since affordability seems irrelevant if you're inquiring, clearly indicating an unintended encounter with a tax bracket. Sitting within my home office, the now converted extra room from when we bought the house, symbolizing aspirations rather than merely legalities on the verge of becoming intricate complexities, I observed each notification arrive like hurricane waves battering a coastline. Each update was another blow, another deception unveiled, another shard of my imagined life disintegrating into dust. The transaction record resembled someone's opulent living fantasy. At a wine bar, a designer clothing store I wasn't familiar with, a jewelry boutique, and various smaller charges at coffee shops and eateries, Claire was enacting a scene from a melodrama, but instead of romance, it was fraud, and instead of laughter, there was my confusion. A particular transaction stood out due to its specificity and detailed merchant data, a dinner reservation at Marcello's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown where bookings are made 3 months in advance, and pasta likely costs more than my monthly utility bill. The charge was $643 for dinner for 2, with a reservation detail even listing a name, Evan. Once more there he was, Mr. Luxury Trip to London, apparently savoring what I could merely guess to be a celebratory meal paid entirely by my funds. Picture myself, them seated, tinkling wine glasses, perhaps mirthful over the perceived simplicity of events, mocking me as an oblivious fraud analyst unable to spot fraud from my own wallet. The vision stirred in me a desire to hurl the laptop against the glass window, but I refrained due to its cost and today's losses. At around 7 p.m., my phone rang, no alert this time, a real call. Eclair's image appeared on screen, a snapshot from last summer at the beach, beaming with joy and far removed from her current criminal actions spanning states. I hesitated twice before deciding how to respond, consider cheerfully as if nothing was amiss, ignore it, or answer in my role as the clueless spouse she seemed to believe me to be. I chose the third option. "Hey, darling," I said, ensuring my tone carried a sufficient level of normalcy without overdoing it and facing regret later for acting. "Hey, sweetheart." Her voice sparkled through the phone, brimming with life. "I'm having an absolutely wonderful day." To my surprise, Jenna organized a last-minute spa retreat. "We're at the Serenity Spa downtown. Have you heard of it? It's sensational. They offer this hot stone massage that supposedly dissolves all your worries. I imagine it would, considering the pressure of deceit. All that concealing and fabrication likely leads to a lot of tension in one's muscles. Thank goodness my wealth could afford someone to ease that burden from your shoulders." "That sounds wonderful," I replied. My voice was as arid as the Sahara, but apparently Claire was too engrossed in spa treatments and crime to discern it. "Sounds soothing." "It truly is. Jenna's treating me to the full package: facials, massages, the works." Her generosity is astounding, yet her obliviousness to my predicament is bewildering. My voice mirrored the serenity people feel when they're truly content, while unbeknownst to me, a catastrophe lurked on the horizon. I'll likely return home around 9. Fancy a quick bite. The nerve, the audacious nerve of this woman to squander nearly $50,000 of my savings and then propose to fetch dinner on her way back as if she were bestowing me a kindness. I was torn between laughter, anger, and disclosure. I contemplated revealing that Jenna wasn't footing the bill for this spa escapade, that it was actually my money being spent, and that she might want to savor that hot stone massage since her next relaxation spot would be a federal prison where luxury was scarce. Instead, I simply replied, "No need. I'll manage. Enjoy yourself. Love you." She cheerfully hung up before I could decide on a response. I sat there clutching my phone, scrutinizing the screen as though it might provide insight into why my life had morphed into a crime thriller. "Love you," she'd said so flippantly, as if those words still carried weight, as if they hadn't become hollow the moment she rummaged through my bag and pilfered my identity. I gathered my wits. The allure of professionalism is strong, and so I returned to the transaction logs. Began constructing a timeline, setting up a spreadsheet because that's what you do when your personal life becomes a police report. Date, time, merchant, amount, location. Each entry was another coffin nail in our marriage. However, I required more than just the stolen credit card data. If I was to execute this properly, if I wanted this entire fiasco to lead to something beyond a divorce and bruised feelings, I needed to delve deeper. I needed to discern if this was a pattern, if Claire had done this before, if there were other victims. Examined our joint financial records, spanning months, bank statements, credit card bills. Retrieved Claire's call logs and text metadata from our shared cellular account. Although I couldn't access the content of the messages, I could identify who she was communicating with and when. And lo and behold, Evan appeared approximately 600 times in the last 3 months. Here comes our dear Evan, indulging in wine tastings and jet-setting via first-class flights, all expenses paid from my bank account. Ignoring potentially a dozen privacy laws, I decided to dig deeper and checked Claire's laptop. Left unattended on the kitchen counter that morning, and with our mutual passwords, it was easy pickings. I opened it, navigated to her email, and began scanning through the content. Mostly uneventful, but I persisted. Unwanted emails from retailers, newsletter subscriptions, email conversations with Jenna about brunch and trendy restaurants. But then I stumbled upon a folder, hidden in her old emails, labeled Travel Ideas. I opened it up. My blood pressure soared into potentially alarming levels. Emails, loads of them. Hotel booking confirmations for places I'd never noticed she'd mentioned. Flight schedules to Paris, Barcelona, Miami. They were all from the past 8 months and charged to credit cards with numbers I didn't recognize. I compared the dates with my own schedule and realized something that made my hands tremble. Every trip aligned perfectly with times I was away for work. When I was in Seattle for a conference, she was in Paris. When I was in Boston meeting clients, she was in Barcelona. When I thought she was having quiet weekends at home, she was enjoying herself in Miami. This wasn't a rare occurrence. This wasn't Claire accidentally discovering my credit card and acting on an impulse. It was calculated, rehearsed, and expertly executed. She had been doing this for months, or possibly longer, without me realizing it. I continued to investigate, uncovering more emails, these from a person named Michael Santos at a luxury watch store downtown. The emails were friendly and appreciative, thanking Claire for her assistance with inventory and customer service. I was unaware that she had ever worked at a watch store. Her part-time job involved managing social media for several small businesses, usually working remotely. When did she start working at the watch store? Upon searching for prestige timepieces online, I found a high-end luxury watch store. The watches were expensive enough to cost more than a college semester. I examined their Instagram, their website, and their Yelp reviews, and there, hidden in a photo from 4 months ago titled "Our Fantastic Team," was Claire, standing behind the counter, smiling, wearing a name tag. Ideas coalesced within my mind, similar to solving the most frustrating puzzle. It involved a high-end watch store frequented by the affluent who would purchase costly items and hand over their credit cards for processing. This setup provided ample opportunities for dishonest employees to steal card details, numbers, expiration dates, CVV codes, or system administrators to gather identity data names, addresses sufficient for a large-scale identity theft operation that would make even hardened criminals envious. I joked to Agent Rivera later, given her appreciation for designer watches, saying in a monotone voice, "Now you're stealing time." Rivera didn't find it amusing. Instead, she looked at me with an emotion blend of pity and professional curiosity, as if I was both a case study victim and an intriguing puzzle to be solved. That evening in my office, with my laptop displaying emails detailing several months of deceit, my phone still flashing alerts from ongoing unauthorized charges, humor was the last thing on my mind. Instead, I felt like a fool, a total, utter fool who had unwittingly wed a criminal, despite my profession being centered around apprehending criminals. At 9:15, Claire arrived home, radiating peacefulness from her spa visit and bearing takeout from some fashionable restaurant, because apparently she'd chosen to get dinner regardless. She kissed me on the cheek, recounted her blissful afternoon, showed off her freshly manicured nails, another charge I would likely discover later in my transaction history. I feigned interest, consumed the meal she provided, and nodded appropriately as she conversed. All the while, I was contemplating federal penitentiary terms, asset forfeiture, and her mastery of deception. Since I hadn't witnessed the evidence firsthand, I never would have suspected. She was that convincing. The ledger I discovered later would unfold a more comprehensive narrative. However, that evening, with $48,700 vanished in a marriage on its legal finalities, I remained seated as my wife detailed her ideal day, bankrolled by fraud. Agent Rivera contacted me at 7:30 the following morning, whether too early or reasonable depending on if you're an early bird or someone who cherishes sleep like a typical individual. I was already awake, having had little rest. Truthfully, I sat at my kitchen table with now cold coffee, scrutinizing spreadsheets that appeared stubbornly unwilling to reorganize themselves into something less catastrophic. Federal Building, 9 m. Bring everything. Her tone bore the crisp, practical cadence that government officials acquire after years of dealing with red tape and criminals who overestimate their intelligence. No small talk. No inquiries about my well-being. Directly to the matter, which I found refreshing since I wasn't up for sentimentality. The Federal Building was one of those bold, modern glass edifices downtown, designed seemingly to embody intimidation as a tangible space, and it succeeded. An excess of windows, an abundance of natural light, and security checks that made the airport seem leisurely. I navigated the metal detectors, received my visitor pass, and followed my guide to Rivera's office on the 7th floor. As anticipated, her office was functional, neat, adorned with commendations and certificates testifying to her skill at apprehending criminals. She boasted one of those expansive monitors displaying approximately 15 different data windows concurrently, a configuration that either made one feel like a spy or induced an immediate headache. 40s-old Rivera was meticulous, discerning she likely deciphered lies before they were fully spoken. Pointing at a coffee pot that seemed aged since the Clinton era, she offered a brew I declined, having learned my lesson about unappetizing federal building Java during FBI tenure. My revelations spilled onto her desk printed transaction logs, screenshots of emails, a timeline outlining coordinated trips between Claire's schedules and mine, pictures from the watch store, bank statements with marked expenses. The presentation resembled an evidence board from a crime drama, except this time, we were tracing my wife's intricate fraud scheme rather than a serial killer. Rivera scrutinized every detail systematically, jotting down notes, querying facts, and cross-referencing data on her computer. 20 minutes of silent examination led Rivera to make her revelation. She's been here before. She rotated her screen towards me, displaying a flagged transaction report. Previously, there had been alerts for similar patterns, involving different cards but identical geographic indicators: Paris, Barcelona, Miami. The luxury hotels, upscale boutiques were the giveaways. The algorithm flagged these as potential fraud circles, yet insufficient evidence was amassed to construct a case. That is, until now. She proceeded to display additional data, account holders reporting suspicious transactions, all with identical signatures. Each purchase hovered just below reporting limits, involved luxury merchants, and international locations. The type of fraud that appears almost legitimate if not closely scrutinized. Few individuals become aware of their vulnerability until their credit card statement arrives, revealing an $8,000 charge for a Paris hotel while they were at home in Ohio, engrossed in Netflix. As Rivera scrutinized the digital screens, he confirmed that Claire wasn't acting solo. The jewelry store, Prestige Timepieces, would have to reassess their security measures. If Claire had access to customer card data during transactions, it presented a lucrative opportunity for an individual constructing a fraud database. My stomach churned. I wasn't taken aback. By this stage, Claire could have disclosed that she was a covert agent, and I would merely have acknowledged it and added it to my mental list. However, the scale of the situation was far larger than I had previously imagined. This wasn't just my wife embezzling from me. She might be stealing from numerous people, perhaps hundreds. Individuals entering a high-end watch store, completing genuine transactions, providing credit card details unknowingly to a woman at the counter who secretly recorded their data. The owner, identified as Michael Santos, requires investigation, considering the possibility of his complicity, being another target, or simply remaining oblivious. He will be questioned. Noting additional details, she glanced at me with an exhausted expression, attempting to convey encouragement but failing to do so convincingly. "You've done commendable work here, Marcus," she said. "I acknowledge this is a personal matter, but your meticulous documentation greatly facilitates my tasks." "Good," I replied tersely. "It's heartening to know my deteriorating marriage can aid in resolving your cases more efficiently." She almost smiled, offering sympathy. "In terms of compensation, allow me to express my condolences. This is regrettable." "Yes." Sinking back into the unyielding government chair, I concurred. "It truly is unfortunate." Rivera proceeded to explain the subsequent course of action. They would collaborate with financial crimes units, retrieve records from the watch store, contact affected individuals, and construct a solid case. They had to proceed cautiously. If Claire suspected she was under investigation, she might flee, dispose of evidence, or inform others possibly involved in the operation. The London trip was scheduled in 3 days, providing them with limited time. "We'll flag her at customs," Rivera suggested. "Let her believe everything is normal. Let her board that plane if she tries, and then we apprehend her upon her return to the US." I agreed, as I grappled with the stark realization that my spouse was on the verge of becoming a federal fugitive suspect. That I was in a government building, aiding in the construction of a case against the individual I had vowed to honor and cherish. Somewhere right now, Claire was possibly at home, meeting Evan, or making her next move, oblivious to the impending collapse of everything around her. Rivera escorted me out, offered a handshake at the elevator, promising to contact me later. I descended 7 floors in quiet reflection, traversed the lobby beyond security checkpoints, and exited into the morning light, feeling as if I'd departed another reality. Passers-by populated the sidewalk, carrying on with everyday activities, causing me to ponder whether any of them teetered on the edge of a life becoming a federal case due to one misstep. I phoned Michael Santos en route to my car, maintaining a casual, friendly tone as if merely a curious man asking innocuous questions. "Hey, this might seem odd, but Claire mentioned she's been assisting at your store. Thought I'd swing by and perhaps surprise her." His response revealed the information I sought. Confusion. Pause. The sound of someone understanding they'd been manipulated. "Claire, she was excellent. Yes, aided us during our busy period some time ago. Haven't seen her lately, though." All was well. "Everything's fine." I fibbed. Needed to verify something. "Thanks, buddy." After ending the call, I remained seated in my car, fixated on the federal building in my rearview mirror as if it might chase me home. A fact often overlooked when conducting a spouse investigation is that you eventually stray from evidence gathering into an obsessive detective mindset, and there's no returning once crossed. I transcended this boundary approximately 10 a.m. on Friday, deciding that if Claire had been foolish enough to save incriminating emails, she might also have retained physical records. After all, cunning criminals share a peculiar impulse to document their wrongdoings. It's almost an obsession they can't resist. They hoard memorabilia, journals, spreadsheets. This quirk in behavior I learned during my FBI training and has been evident in nearly 100 subsequent cases. During lunch, I returned home, informed my assistant of a dentist appointment, an unquestioned work absence excuse due to its private nature, and initiated a meticulous search, which felt oddly inappropriate given the crime scene was my own bedroom. The hunt began with the apparent locations. Her desk drawers held old receipts, makeup samples, and an assortment of broken pens. Her closet consisted of garments, footwear, and an abundance of handbags, now seemingly more suspicious due to her shopping habits disclosure. Her nightstand contained books, chapstick, a light-blocking sleep mask, all innocent items. Lastly, I examined her jewelry box. It was one of those ornate wooden boxes with numerous compartments, containing a miniature ballerina that rotates upon opening. Claire found it endearing, while I found it somewhat unsettling in its uncanny valley aspect. The box resided openly on her dresser, as jewelry boxes typically do, because visibility is their purpose after all a place for keeping one's trinkets. However, Claire was not your average person. Upon opening the first layer, I found earrings, necklaces, and a few rings, nothing out of the ordinary. The second layer offered more of the same items, as well as a watch that I had given her for our 5th anniversary, still unadorned because it didn't meet her standard of fanciness. The third layer held intrigue. Beneath the velvet lining, I felt something hard, not in the shape of jewelry, but rectangular and flat instead. I removed the liner, revealing a small black notebook, the type commonly found at drugstores for $3. It seemed ordinary, suitable for grocery lists or exercise regimens. However, upon opening it, I discovered something far from ordinary. If Claire had been making shopping lists for groceries, these weren't your average items, they were credit card numbers and expiration dates. Page after page was filled with handwritten entries detailing card numbers, expiration dates, security codes, locations, transaction dates, dollar amounts. It was a ledger, a tangible, incriminating record of every fraudulent transaction Claire had made over the past year, possibly longer. I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling slightly, feeling a strange blend of shock and validation. Shock because it was as if my wife was keeping a criminal journal like a delusional accountant. Validation because this evidence was solid enough to construct a house upon. 40 unrecognized names, presumably shoppers from a watch store who didn't know their data had been breached, were listed on at least 40 cards. Each card number was accompanied by notes for Paris hotel, Barcelona shopping, Miami restaurants, as if Claire were cataloging her own fraud collection for tax reasons or some equally irrational purpose. Standing in my room with this notebook, I was unsure whether to laugh or shatter something through the window due to the audacity of keeping physical records and blatant disregard for operational security. This type of error was what routinely led to criminals being apprehended, yet Claire made it with the conviction of someone who genuinely thought they'd never be found out. I photographed every page using my phone, ensuring the lighting was adequate, carefully confirming that each number and note was easily readable. Then I messaged Rivera, discovered something. "You'll be interested in this artifact." "Bring it here," she replied promptly. I covered the notebook in a plastic wrap, mindful of crime TV lessons on preserving evidence. While it wasn't a real crime scene, and I had no need to fret about fingerprints since they undoubtedly belonged to Claire, I handled it with utmost care, as if it held nuclear secrets. After returning the velvet lining in the jewelry box and securing all compartments, making sure everything remained unchanged, I feared that if Claire returned home and noticed the notebook was missing, our operation would collapse before we could execute an arrest. On the ride back to the federal building, I contacted Rivera and filled her in on the situation. She informed me about the findings: international transaction alerts, coordination with UK customs, suspicious activities from various financial institutions. Michael Santos at the watch store had been providing complete assistance, a term typically used in law enforcement for someone who is extremely apprehensive and disclosing everything. It turned out that Claire had been employed there for 4 months, consistently assisting with the register, being cordial to customers, and offering help, an ideal employee and a perfect disguise. "This ledger," Rivera remarked as I presented it in her office 20 minutes later, "this is the decisive evidence. With this and the transaction data, we have her cornered. We're talking interstate fraud, identity theft, likely money laundering given the amounts and international transactions. This could lead to a federal prison sentence, Marcus." I nodded, watching her flip through pages, observing her expression change from professional curiosity to something more akin to astonishment. "She meticulously recorded everything," Rivera continued. "Every card, every purchase, every journey. It's as if she wanted to be apprehended. She believed she was more intelligent than everyone else," I whispered. "She thought she'd evade detection due to my obliviousness and others' preoccupation. However, you've shown otherwise, leading to potential jurisdiction concerns. The UK's Crown Prosecution Service may require these documents: the flight tickets, international transactions. This could be a case spanning continents." Somehow, I found pride in that revelation. My marriage, on the other hand, felt like it was flattened by a freight train, double hit for emphasis, and then torched just to ensure its demise. Yet, at least I'm helping international law enforcement cooperation. Finding positives, I suppose. Rivera outlined subsequent actions: tracking Claire, scrutinizing her finances, readying for the airport apprehension. Everything was accelerating now, federal justice mechanisms activating swiftly. I completed paperwork, made declarations, turned into a witness in what had become an official federal probe. After leaving the federal building that afternoon with my notebook securely in evidence storage, I felt oddly relieved. It seemed as though I'd been carrying an unnoticed burden and finally let it go. The truth was now public, recorded, and stored digitally in government databases. Claire's flawless crime, eternally archived in case files and evidence vaults. I stopped for coffee on my way home, authentic brew from a local shop, not the bland concoction served at federal buildings, and made a dark comment to the barista without intending to. "Tough day at work?" she asked, likely because I resembled someone who'd just witnessed their life collapse. "One could say that," I responded. "Discovered my wife has been running a fraud ring, but on the bright side, she kept meticulous records." The barista chuckled nervously, evidently uncertain if I was joking. I wasn't certain either, truthfully. The distinction between tragedy and comedy had become indistinct. Anticipating the imminent fallout is psychologically agonizing. I can attest to this, having spent the ensuing 3 days navigating a limbo-like existence. In this state, I was compelled to maintain a facade of normalcy while secretly bracing for my wife's impending arrest at the airport by federal agents. It felt like witnessing a slow-motion accident from within the vehicle, a vehicle I had inadvertently summoned law enforcement for, and one that still expected me to attend Thanksgiving dinner as if nothing were amiss. Claire spent those 3 days meticulously packing, doing so with an air of cheerfulness. Oddly enough, our house's guest bed seemed to serve a purpose other than its intended one, organizing international fraud escapades. She repeatedly inquired about London weather in November and sought advice on choosing between a blue or black dress. While sipping coffee, my spirit feeling drained, I offered suggestions like, "The blue one is better." Inside, I was screaming in frustration. She presented her printed itinerary, extravagant first-class flights, my funds, a five-star lodging in Kensington, also my money, reservations at restaurants difficult to pronounce, predictably my expenditure. Her excitement for the trip was akin to that of a lottery winner, not someone who financed it through identity theft. The disconnect was enormous. On Sunday night, 2 days before departure, she exclaimed, "I'm so excited," referring to Jenna, who had never been to London. She believed the trip would be extraordinary. Still maintaining the facade of Jenna, still concealing the truth with practiced ease. I desired to disclose that it wasn't Jenna going, but Evan. I knew all along. However, Rivera made it clear, maintain normality, avoid arousing suspicion, let her settle down. The operation would be open and impossible to escape. On Monday, Claire sent me photos. Pictures of her at the spa getting her nails done, preparing London, sipping overpriced smoothies for pre-travel detox. A sunset rooftop shot, Austin's last before the journey. Each photo seemed like a taunt, as if she was live streaming her own criminal activities. I replied with thumbs up and smiley emojis, forwarding each image to Agent Rivera for the case records. Agent Rivera collaborated with SAW and Customs at Austin Bergstrom International Airport. They flagged Claire's ticket, arranged for secondary inspection, and prepared the arrest procedure. The strategy was simple yet elegant. Allow her to check in routinely, pass through security, relax. In the entrance, perform extra screening on her, and execute an unobtrusive arrest away from spectators. It's a routine procedure like those at airports, often overlooked by passengers. The following morning, Tuesday, the day of departure, I stirred awake at 5 a.m., despite my alarm not ringing until 6. Insomnia had taken hold, leaving me to gaze aimlessly at the ceiling while Claire bustled around the house, her suitcase in tow, double-checking her passport, the one she'd been poring over in my gym bag for weeks. All signs had led to this point, and as it arrived, I felt an unexpected emptiness. No longer filled with rage or betrayal, just exhaustion. As Claire asked if I needed a ride before departing, her suitcase containing goods bought with stolen funds, her ticket purchased through deceit, her entire journey constructed on a bed of felonies, I effortlessly spun a lie, having grown adept at deception over the past week. Text when you arrive. She gave me a goodbye kiss, one on the lips. It was as if we were an ordinary couple parting for a usual journey. She told me she loved me, but I didn't return the sentiment. Instead, I smiled and waved as she stepped into her Uber. After all, she wasn't driving herself. Why leave a car at the airport when someone else can pay for the ride and watch it drive away? So I drove my own car to the airport since Rivera had invited me to observe from the security office, and there was no chance I'd miss this moment. The TSA security office in Austin Bergstrom is a part of the airport that regular travelers rarely visit. It's behind the scenes, up some stairs, through doors secured by badges and clearance. Rivera welcomed me there, along with two other agents whose names I failed to remember due to the adrenaline and animosity coursing through my veins at that moment. Monitors in the office displayed every security checkpoint, entryway, and corner of the terminal. Airport surveillance had no match for Big Brother. We observed Claire checking in at the British Airways counter, donning a blue dress. It was an astute choice, I mused grudgingly. She exchanged pleasantries with the ticket agent, likely engaged in small talk, retrieving her boarding pass and baggage claim tickets. All seemed ordinary, standard procedure. Traveling solo, an agent inquired, reviewing notes. However, she was supposed to be meeting someone at the gate, Rivera clarified. The partner, he possessed a separate ticket and distinct confirmation number. They would retrieve him as well. I observed Claire passing through TA pre-screening, given her familiarity with the process, likely a result of her earlier acquisition of membership using one of her stolen cards. She strolled effortlessly through security, her seasoned traveler's stride betraying no concern. Retrieving her luggage from the belt and slipping back into her shoes, she headed towards her gate as if free from worries. However, it was then I spotted Evan. He arrived roughly 15 minutes later, likewise checking in, undergoing security checks, and blissfully unaware. Dressed in an expensive casual ensemble that exuded, "I have wealth but desire to appear accessible," featuring designer jeans, a button-down shirt, and a pricey leather jacket, more costly than my monthly auto payment, he was a figure I harbored resentment towards, yet felt a tinge of pity for due to his evident cluelessness regarding the impending situation. They connected at the designated boarding area. I observed as Claire brightened upon spotting him, then they embraced, sat in the departure lounge conversing and laughing, seemingly on the brink of an extraordinary journey. In a sense, they were embarking on quite a different adventure than anticipated. Rivera glanced at her timepiece. Customs is prepared. SAW agents are in place. We're to move in 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes seemed endless, like hours. I saw Claire sip her coffee, something she typically disliked, yet tolerated today, watched Evan scroll through his phone, observed other passengers board the flight, ordinary travelers embarking on routine journeys, oblivious to the fact that in a few moments, two of their fellow passengers would be apprehended by federal agents. Now, Rivera communicated discreetly via her radio. Two CHA officials approached Claire and Evan. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could read their body language. They were professional, composed, devoid of any fuss. Claire seemed puzzled. Evan appeared irritated. They rose, took their luggage, and followed the officials towards a secluded hallway distanced from the main entrance. Momentarily, customs officers appeared. Shiny badges, handcuffs, the universally recognized "you are under arrest" stance that every police officer worldwide seems to know instinctively. Claire's expression swiftly morphed from puzzled to astonished, then terrified in a matter of seconds. Evan merely looked dumbfounded, as if his mind was still struggling to grasp the situation. I remained in the security office, observing on screens, and felt nothing. No contentment, no validation. A strange feeling of closure instead, like forcing oneself to complete an unenjoyable book. Rivera looked at me. "You all right?" I replied. "Yes," and it was accurate. I was okay, not fantastic, not joyful, but okay. "Can I leave now?" She agreed. "We'll require your testimony later, but for the moment, you are excused." I stand there in the security office, observing them on monitors, and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just this strange sense of finality, like closing a book one didn't particularly enjoy, but still had to finish anyway. Well done. Exiting the airport via a secluded route, I skipped the terminal altogether and drove home in a hushed atmosphere. Upon arrival, the house seemed altered, more peaceful, quieter, emptier, yet surprisingly clean, as if fresh air had been let in after decades of accumulation. I prepared coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and for the first time in weeks, I refrained from glancing at my phone for potential fraud notifications. No longer did I scrutinize transactions or speculate about Claire's activities or expenditures. The alerts had ceased. The case was resolved. The remainder was merely administrative work. The painful moment at the airport. Anticipating a second disaster is psychological torment. This understanding comes from experiencing the next 3 days in an unsettling limbo, where I had to feign normalcy despite knowing that my wife was about to be apprehended at the airport by federal officials. It's like witnessing a gradual car crash unfold before your eyes. For 3 days, Claire cheerfully packed for her trip, while I sat nearby, my spirit gradually fading, as she asked questions about London's weather in November and what dress to bring. Our guest bed, seldom used except for organizing illicit trips, served as a packing station. The planned destination was Kensington, a 5-star hotel funded by me, along with dinner reservations at restaurants I couldn't even pronounce. Unbeknownst to her, the funds for this extravagant vacation came from her identity theft scheme. She displayed an enthusiasm usually reserved for sweepstakes winners, not fraudsters. The discordance in thoughts was immense. "I'm so enthusiastic," she expressed on Sunday night, 2 days before the journey. "Jenna has never been to London. It's going to be fantastic." Pretending with Jenna as a disguise, deceiving effortlessly, as if it had become second nature after months of practice. I considered revealing to her that Jenna wouldn't be coming, that Evan would instead, that I was privy to the truth. But Rivera made it clear: maintain normality, avoid tipping her off, allow her to settle down comfortably. The arrest would be transparent and inescapable. On Monday morning, Claire sent me images: her at the spa getting a manicure, preparing London for the visit, smoothies from some pricey juice bar, a pre-trip detox, photos of a rooftop sunset, the last Austin sunset before the journey. Each photo seemed like a jest, as if she was live recording her own criminal escapade and broadcasting it to the world. I responded with a thumbs-up emoji. That saw security office at Austin Bergstrom is in an area of the airport seldom frequented by ordinary travelers. Beyond hidden corridors, ascending some stairs, past entryways secured by badges and clearance, Rivera greeted me. Accompanying her were two other agents whose names slipped my mind due to the surge of adrenaline and resentment at the time. The room was equipped with screens displaying every security post, gate, and terminal corner. Airport surveillance had no match for Big Brother. We watched Claire check in at the British Airways counter, dressed in blue, an astute choice, I thought begrudgingly. She exchanged smiles with the ticket agent, likely engaging in small talk before receiving her boarding pass and baggage claim tickets. Routine proceedings. The situation was ordinary. Traveling alone, it seemed. One of the agents inquired, referring to his notes. He should have been meeting someone at the gate. Rivera clarified. Her boyfriend. He held a separate ticket with a distinct confirmation number. We were to collect him as well. I observed Claire pass through Dazaa pre-check, predictably given her pre-check status. Likely used a stolen card for registration, she moved effortlessly through security as a seasoned traveler would. She retrieved her luggage from the belt, put her shoes back on, and walked casually towards her gate as if she had no worries. Upon arrival, Evan appeared, similarly unaware, 15 minutes later, proceeding through check-in and security. His attire spoke volumes of his affluence, yet desire to appear relatable: pricey jeans, button-down shirt, and a leather jacket possibly exceeding my monthly car payment cost. I held resentment towards him inherently, but also felt a touch of pity as he seemed clueless about the situation he was stepping into. At their designated gate, they reunited. On the monitors, I observed Claire's expression brighten upon seeing him. Their hug, their seating in the waiting area for a chat, and laughter suggested an upcoming journey full of excitement indeed. Their experience may be considered as such. Unexpected type, as Rivera had anticipated. She glanced at her watch. Customs prepared, saw positioned. 5 minutes later, we proceed. Those 5 minutes stretched into hours. Claire sipped her disliked airport coffee today, seemingly content. Evan, scrolling on his phone. Passengers boarded their flight routinely, unaware that in a few moments, two of their fellow passengers would be taken into custody by federal agents. Now, Rivera communicated silently through her radio. Two TSA agents approached Claire and Evan. Their conversation was indiscernible to me, yet their body language spoke volumes: professional, calm, devoid of drama. Claire showed signs of confusion. Evan appeared annoyed. They both rose, took their luggage, and followed the agents down a side corridor, distancing themselves from the main gate area. At this point, customs officers intervened, displaying badges, securing handcuffs. The universally recognized "you are under arrest" stance, instinctively known by all police officers globally, left Claire baffled, then shocked, then petrified in mere seconds. Evan merely stared, his expression stunned, as if his mind was struggling to comprehend the situation unfolding. I remained unmoved in the security office, watching the events on monitors, feeling an unusual sense of finality, akin to closing an unenjoyable yet obligatory book. Rivera looked at me. Are you all right? Yes, I replied sincerely. I'm fine, not great, not happy, but fine. Can I leave now? She granted her permission with a nod. We'll require your testimony later. For now, your work here is done. Well done. Exiting the airport via a secluded path and avoiding the terminal altogether, I drove home in silence. Upon arrival, the house seemed altered, quieter, emptier, yet somehow cleaner. Years-old stale air seemed to escape through open windows. Prepared coffee. Took a seat at the kitchen table. For the first time in weeks, I didn't scrutinize my phone for fraud notifications. Neglected transaction monitoring. Disregarded worries about Claire's activities, locations, or spending habits. The alerts had ceased. The case was concluded. Remaining were only paperwork. They transported Claire to Travis County Jail initially. This is a standard practice for federal arrests at the airport. It's a vast, gloomy concrete structure located off Highway 183 that looks just as one would expect a jail to appear. Gray, disheartening, enclosed by chain-link fences and surveillance cameras, a place where hope fades away. I chose not to visit, did not wish to. Rivera phoned me at around 2 p.m. to confirm the arrest was completed, and Claire was now in custody. She requested a call, Rivera cautioned. You may initially be the one she calls. I responded with thanks and ended the call. Afterward, I found myself fixated on my phone as if it were a ticking bomb. 45 minutes later, Claire's name, accompanied by the jail's number, appeared on my screen. Despite the reason, I let it ring 3 times before responding. Perhaps I wanted to make her wait, or perhaps I was merely stalling the inevitable. Maybe I'm becoming someone who finds pleasure in seeing others uncomfortable. Most likely, it's a mix of all three. Damaged, emotional, and I despise that a fragment of me still reacted when I heard her voice. Yes, I said, keeping my tone even, not affectionate, not frigid, merely level. Marcus, there's been a misunderstanding. They arrested me at the airport. They suspect I took credit cards or something preposterous. It's ridiculous. I need you to contact a lawyer. Tell them you gave me permission to use your card. Tell them, Claire. I broke off our conversation, and the thick silence that ensued felt almost tangible over the phone. Stop speaking, Marcus, but you don't grasp the situation. No, you can't comprehend it. You don't understand. I rose from my seat, unable to remain still, and began pacing my kitchen. It wasn't because you were arrested for credit card theft. They took you in because you did indeed steal credit cards, 40 of them or more. There's evidence logs, transaction data, a ledger with your handwriting detailing each fraudulent purchase made over the past year. This time, the silence held a different weight, the kind that arises when one realizes there's no escape from an impending trap. I could hear her breath, quick and fearful, and knew she was mentally calculating how I'd found out, how they had discovered it, and why everything had spiraled so disastrously. Marcus, spare your breath for your attorney, I sternly reminded him. My voice carried an unwanted chill. Perhaps as cold as planned, yet uncertain at this moment. You won't manage it. It's impossible for you. How dare you exploit the wife card after all that transpired? I chuckled. Not out of amusement, but due to lack of other options. To weep, to shout, to hurl my phone. You ceased being my wife the instant you rummaged through my bag and assumed my identity, I asserted. Everything since then was merely deepening your predicament, and I provided the tools for that. What are you referring to? The trap card, Claire. The one found in your gym bag. The one with $57,000. The one used to book hotel rooms, spa services, first-class flights to London. That was a setup. I warned you. You seized it. And now you're precisely where you deserve. I heard her start sobbing, genuine tears. Not the deceitful type, 1,000 times before unbeknownst to me. These seemed sincere, desperate, as if someone's world was falling apart live on screen. Yet I felt nothing. Or rather, I felt weary, drained, as if I'd been lugging around something burdensome for so long that putting it down only made me recognize the damage it had inflicted. She apologized, whispered sorry. Marcus, I'm sorry. I never meant to. I didn't think. You didn't think you'd get caught. I completed her sentence. None of you ever do. That's why individuals like me have roles. I disconnected before she could utter another word. Didn't grant her the farewell. Didn't offer her another moment of my time. Terminated the call and blocked the prison's number because, if she tried calling again, I didn't wish to be informed about it. The house was still. That silence that settles in when something substantial concludes, and one is left in the wreckage trying to decipher what comes next. Prepared a turkey and cheese sandwich, nothing extravagant. Ate it casually at the counter as I felt formal dining was unnecessary given my ambiguous state. Not engaged, but not divorced either, neither single nor accompanied. Caught between relationship limbo with no distinct classification. My phone vibrated, not Claire this time, instead a text from Rivera. Appearance scheduled for tomorrow morning. Federal Courthouse, 9 a.m. You aren't required to attend, thought I'd inform you. I responded gratefully and declined. I didn't wish to witness her in an orange jumpsuit. Had no desire to observe her stand before a judge and plead. Preferred to stay away from the impending legal drama. I had fulfilled my duty. Collected the evidence, constructed the case, handed it over to those who manage such matters. My role was finished, at least for the time being. Eventually, I would need to testify, offer depositions, likely revisit this ordeal in front of lawyers and juries. However, it was the future's concern for Marcus. Presently, Marcus yearned for peace and tranquility. Around 6 p.m., calls began pouring in. My mother, who oddly enough seemed to be informed despite my silence. Claire's sister, insistent on knowing the circumstances and accusing me of negligence. A few acquaintances who had stumbled upon news of the incident via social media. Apparently, someone at the airport had captured the arrest and uploaded it online. Since that seems to be our current reality where private hardships become fodder for content, I chose to disregard them all, letting their messages go to voicemail. I muted my phone and placed it face down on the counter. The following morning, I was awakened by 17 missed calls and roughly 30 text messages. Word of Claire's arrest had spread rapidly through our circle as if igniting a wildfire. Everyone wanted updates. Everyone had opinions. Everyone suddenly claimed to have always suspected something about Claire. None of them said anything useful when it mattered, yet they were amusing. A watch store employee called next, not Michael Santos, but another, inquiring if I knew what transpired since the FBI had arrived and questioned staff. I chose not to return the call. It wasn't my affair anymore. It was federal investigation terrain, and I was merely a civilian witness attempting to determine my next steps. The most peculiar call was from Jenna, Claire's closest friend, the one Claire had longed to emulate. She left a voicemail. Marcus, I honestly didn't know what she was up to. I swear, please get in touch with me. I trusted her, mostly. Jenna was materialistic and superficial, not someone I'd choose to socialize with willingly. However, I didn't consider her a criminal. Rather, I thought she was unaware. A person accustomed to an existence laden with privilege, uninterested in the origins of her wealth, for why should she? As luxury becomes routine, questions cease to arise. I spent the day immersed in idleness, consuming television, browsing my phone, and ordering meals delivered, existing in a limbo-like state where the old life was left behind, yet the new one hadn't begun. Simultaneously, Claire was confined within a cell in a distant jail, possibly still grappling with how everything had spiraled down so swiftly. Meanwhile, I found myself in a residence that felt oversized and vacant, pondering what follows the conclusion of happily ever after when it leads to incarceration in federal penitentiaries. Federal courthouses possess a unique aesthetic I label as intimidating impartiality. Everything is either beige, gray, or some other hue that wouldn't offend anyone if attempted. The floors are polished to such a gleam that it likely breaches some reflection safety guidelines. The security is as strict as airports saw, a fact that's significant given my recent experience of witnessing my wife's arrest at an airport. The entire environment exudes an odor not unpleasant, rather institutional, reminiscent of cleaning agents, aged paper, and the underlying tension carried by everyone who has ever passed through those doors, aware their life was on the verge of transformation. On Wednesday morning, I attended Claire's arraignment in my best suit, which felt incongruous given I wasn't the defendant. However, Agent Rivera had advised me to dress smartly, as there might be media presence. Indeed, two news vans were parked outside, with reporters speaking gravely about local crime while facing cameras. I evaded them, entered through a side entrance that Rivera had informed me about used by regular courthouse attendees to dodge the spectacle. The courtroom bore a familiar aspect if you've ever witnessed Law and Order or any legal drama. Yet it seemed both monotonous and imposing simultaneously. Panels of wood adorned every surface. An American flag that had likely been hanging since the building's inauguration in 1987. Benches positioned strategically to dissuade comfort during court proceedings. I found myself seated in the gallery, a discreet third row from the front, possibly unsuccessful in my attempt at invisibility given my role as the victim and crucial witness. Claire entered, attired in an orange jumpsuit that didn't flatter her complexion. She appeared fatigued and apprehensive. Her hair was haphazardly tied back in a ponytail, devoid of the usual meticulous makeup she always wore. Absence of such vanity was comparable to her arriving unclothed. This attention to appearance had always been Claire's constant trait. She stood now in federal court, bearing the appearance of someone who had endured a night within county jail, as that was indeed her circumstance. Our eyes briefly met, perhaps for half a second. She regarded me with an expression compounded of betrayal, despair, and bewilderment at my actions, a sentiment ironic given her own actions towards me. I averted my gaze, examined the wooden paneling, counted the ceiling tiles. Any distraction to sidestep interaction with the woman who was once my wife, and now federal defendant, identified by some number or other. It was comforting that Evan's arraignment was scheduled separately, at a different time slot and arrangement, I appreciated since I had no wish to undergo two such trials. One was already beyond my emotional tolerance for a midweek morning. The assistant U.S. attorney overseeing the case was Dana Ortiz, a woman who seemed as if she had emerged from a suit and likely spent her nights contemplating legal precedents. In her mid-40s, she sported a no-nonsense hairstyle, a seasoned prosecutor who had heard every excuse and sob story for nearly 2 decades without much surprise. She presented the allegations with the precision of someone reciting a grocery list, yet the items on this list were serious felonies with significant prison sentences attached: credit card fraud spanning multiple states, identity theft affecting over 40 individuals, money laundering via international transactions, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. She enumerated them coolly, meticulously, as if discussing the weather rather than the dismantling of numerous lives' financial foundations. The government possesses substantial proof, such as transaction records, the defendant's own documentation, witness testimonies from a watch store where the defendant obtained card information, and cooperation from the primary victim, the defendant's spouse. In court, it struck a different chord for the defendant's spouse as the accusations were made aloud. That was I. I was the main victim, not merely a victim, but the principal one, the key witness in my own marriage's dismantling. Claire's legal counsel was a public defender who seemed younger than 12 years old and overpowered by the situation. He strived admirably. He pleaded that Claire had local connections, no previous convictions, and wasn't a flight risk, even after being apprehended at an airport trying to board a foreign flight. He portrayed her as a good person who made poor decisions, someone worthy of leniency before the trial. Ortiz rebutted with the journal, the aesthetically pleasing, damning, incredibly foolish journal that Claire had kept in her jewelry box like some sort of criminal diary. Your Honor, the defendant maintained meticulous records of her wrongdoings. 43 distinct credit card numbers. Usage dates spanning 8 months. Transactions in Paris, Barcelona, Miami, and various domestic sites. This is not an isolated incident, but rather a calculated, premeditated fraud. The accused was apprehended with first-class tickets to London, purchased illicitly with stolen funds, indicating an intent to continue this scheme globally. She poses a high flight risk and has consistently exhibited criminal behavior until her capture. Judge Morales, a man likely in his late 60s, repeatedly adjusted his reading glasses as he perused the documents. After both sides presented their arguments, he directly addressed Claire. Miss Hale, the evidence points to a sustained pattern of deliberate criminal activity spanning an extended time frame. You kept records of your misdeeds. Using your position of trust within a luxury retail establishment, you obtained personal customer information. You made significant purchases utilizing stolen financial details across numerous states, intending to travel internationally with funds gained through illicit activities. The government has established both the gravity of the allegations against you and the danger you present. Bail is refused. You'll remain in federal detention until trial. The gavel fell with finality. That sound, that crisp thud of wood against wood, felt conclusive, unlike any other event prior. Claire's expression faltered. She turned to her attorney, presumably asking about the implications, a possible appeal, or any potential escape route. There was none. I understood the system. I knew its workings. Once bail is denied in federal court, there's no turning back. You wait in custody until trial and pray your lawyer outperforms the prosecutor. If Dana Ortiz is the prosecutor, then good luck indeed. Claire exited through a side door, typically for defendants heading back to their cells instead of freedom. She avoided eye contact again, perhaps unable to, or because it was too painful. The husband she'd been deceiving might have been the same one who diligently recorded every move and handed over evidence to federal agents. Now he sat in court as her bail was denied. I remained seated as the courtroom emptied, with other cases lined up and people's lives on the brink of legal entanglement. The system chugged along relentlessly. Justice operates like a conveyor belt. Cases enter one end, verdicts exit the other, and nobody pauses to inquire about the well-being of the individuals involved because the system only concerns itself with guilt or innocence. And even then, it's primarily focused on managing paperwork effectively. Agent Rivera encountered me in the hallway. All well? I questioned the use of the term well. I typically replied with this response. Understood. She was carrying a folder, likely containing more case files or evidence to secure Claire's lengthy prison sentence. The watch store owner is collaborating. We have identified 37 potential victims from the ledger, reached out to most of them. A few more might surface when media coverage intensifies. This investigation seems robust. I acknowledged with a monotone tone. It was disappointing that my marriage's demise could bolster your conviction statistics. I had made this joke previously, but it still seemed fitting. Perhaps I would continue to make such biting remarks years later, reminding myself of how my wife ended up in prison, while all I received was a meager witness statement. As it turns out, Rivera said, her voice softer than normal, you did the right thing. I know that won't alleviate your current pain, but you did. I gave a nod, unsure of what else to express. Indeed, I did the correct action by apprehending the felon, collecting proof, and contributing to the case construction. Regrettably, this pursuit led to the dissolution of my marriage, the loss of my partner, who at this point I had no intention of retaining. Now, I'm the subject of dinner party tales, a cautionary narrative. You suspect your spouse might be suspicious. Allow me to share a story. The press caught me exiting the premises. Journalists with recording devices and cameras, inquiring about my feelings, opinions on the allegations, and suspicions. I provided no answers. Instead, I walked past with my head lowered, entered my car, locked the doors, and remained there for several minutes, struggling to resume normal breathing. My phone vibrated. A message from Michael Santos at the watch store. Saw the news. I'm deeply sorry. I was unaware she was misusing customer data. We've imposed new security measures, if you ever desire to discuss. I chose not to respond. What could I possibly say? Gratitude for unknowingly aiding my wife's fraudulent network. Truly admire how your business practices facilitated systematic identity theft. That sentiment would certainly be well received. Driving home amidst the noon traffic, radio silent, only the engine hum and rode beneath me in solitary contemplation. The house remained tranquil upon arrival, void of life as it once was when Claire resided here. I brewed coffee, the ever-present elixir to problems that remain stubbornly unsolved by its warmth. Settled at my kitchen table with laptop in hand, I began examining practicalities. Divorce attorneys, asset division, and navigating the legal complexities of separating from a spouse ensconced in federal custody. The romance had ceased, but the bureaucracy remained, intricate and seemingly insurmountable. Quite the symbol of life's progression, researching divorce procedures for an imprisoned spouse at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. The ledger had spoken its truth. The court had delivered its verdict, imprisoning Claire in federal detention for an extended period prior to trial and likely years beyond conviction. Meanwhile, I'd remain here, ensconced in this home and existence, contemplating my next steps when the foundation of our shared life crumbled, revealing a stranger I hadn't truly known. The peculiarity of federal cases lies in their prolonged duration. Unlike films where matters are resolved swiftly within 2 hours, punctuated by a climactic courtroom disclosure and tearful testimony, real cases span an eternity. They stretch on for months, with attorneys filing motions, discovery unfolding, and the passage of time erasing memories of life before it was filled with depositions, court hearings, and emails from prosecutors seeking clarification of testimony offered 6 weeks ago. 4 months after her arrest, Claire confessed to her crimes, not out of remorse or a newfound understanding of wrongdoing, but as a strategic move, wanting to expedite the legal process. Claire admitted guilt as the case presented by Dana Ortiz was watertight, strong enough to keep leftovers in it. Her new public defender, replacing the one overwhelmed by the case, understood that a trial would only exacerbate matters. I missed the plea hearing, but Rivera informed me later. Claire appeared before Judge Morales, softly confessing to crimes likely to shape her future: credit card fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. These non-pardonable felonies remain, haunting background checks, causing unease among potential employers, and making her a case study at fraud prevention seminars. The sentencing occurred 2 months later. This time I was present. I didn't go to see Claire out of personal desire, but rather to fulfill a sense of obligation towards the 43 individuals whose financial data she had stolen and misused. It seemed appropriate for someone to stand in for all those affected by her actions, which disrupted their lives while financing her lavish lifestyle. The courtroom remained unchanged, the same beige walls, uncomfortable benches, and American flag, but it felt more weighty this time, more conclusive. Arraignment is merely the start. Sentencing is the end. This was the final act, the closing argument, the point where the true cost of justice in terms of years and dollars would be revealed. Claire appeared altered. Incarceration had that effect. It seemed to make her physically smaller, as if the concrete walls, fluorescent lights, and reality of being a federal inmate had taken a toll on her. She'd lost weight. Her hair was shorter, practical, devoid of the stylish perfection she once maintained. Dana Ortiz, in her usual organized manner, proposed the sentencing. "Your Honor," she began, "the defendant conducted systematic fraud lasting at least 8 months, possibly longer. In her role at a prestigious watch company, she illegally accessed personal information from 43 individuals. With this data, she utilized stolen credit card information to finance a lavish lifestyle, including international trips, luxury lodging, designer items, and expensive dining. The total unlawful charges surpassed $200,000 among all victims." Hearing that figure stated in federal court made it undeniably clear, something I'd only grasped when seeing it on spreadsheets. Claire stole $200,000 from ordinary people, from shoppers who visited the store innocently, made legitimate purchases, and remained unaware that their card details were being surreptitiously recorded for future misuse. Ortiz stated, "The government proposes a sentence of 7 years imprisonment in a federal facility, along with 3 additional years of supervision upon release. Furthermore, we are pushing for full compensation to all affected parties, alongside penalties and charges." The defendant exhibited cunningness in her offenses, maintained thorough records, and persisted in her criminal activities until apprehension. She clearly showcases a pattern of deliberate deception and displayed no regret until confronted with irrefutable evidence. 7 years, a 7-year term in federal imprisonment. I swiftly calculated the figure. Upon release, she would be 45 years old, provided good conduct and all that. Middle-aged with a felony background and slim employment prospects, she'd spend her later 40s explaining to potential employers why there's a 7-year vacancy in her work history that aligns perfectly with her federal incarceration. The lawyer for the defense emphasized Claire's clean past, her post-arrest compliance, and revealed her challenging upbringing, which I was unaware of despite our 7 years of marriage, suggesting either dishonesty or withheld disclosure. He portrayed her as someone who committed grave errors, yet merited another chance for rehabilitation, albeit for a lesser sentence, possibly 5 years. In a way typical of defense attorneys when they know the evidence is unfavorable, but must argue nonetheless, he appealed for leniency. Judge Morales heard him out, scrutinized papers, readjusted his glasses, and then addressed Claire. Miss Hale, you orchestrated a planned deception to defraud numerous victims. You violated trust. Your criminal acts were meticulously documented, demonstrating both forethought and complexity. The damage you inflicted is significant. Beyond the monetary damage, which is substantial in itself, there's the breach of trust, intrusion into privacy, and the long-term consequences for victims who now must vigilantly manage their credit, switch accounts, and live with the fact that their personal data was exposed. He paused, allowing this to sink in. I acknowledge your guilty plea, lack of prior convictions, and expressed remorse, although the court doubts its genuineness due to the lengthy period of your offenses. Then came the verdict. I impose a 6-year sentence in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are mandated to fully reimburse all identified victims, totaling $214,000, as well as court fees and penalties. During your supervision, you will be barred from working in any role involving financial transactions or handling personal information. Regular monitoring and reporting will be required. Any breach of these conditions will lead to immediate imprisonment. 6 years. 6 years of Claire's life vanished, spent in federal prison as I had expected, a medium security facility likely situated in Texas or Oklahoma. Not the menacing prisons depicted in movies, but neither vacation destinations. It was merely an extended period of regimented tedium, the steady progression of time served. The repercussions of her decisions finally materialized. They released her. Once again, she avoided eye contact. Perhaps she had come to terms with the fact that whatever we shared was past. That the man she wed and the one who contributed to her incarceration were one and the same, and that contradiction was too complex to grasp while shackled. The repayment phase held a darkly amusing aspect. $214. Claire couldn't afford such a sum. She'd squander it on sustaining her current lifestyle, meaning she'd likely make payments for years to come, provided she managed to secure a job offering wages beyond minimum with her felony history. The funds owed to the victims would be recuperated eventually via the federal restitution system, but Claire would continue to pay that debt until her old age. After leaving the courthouse, I encountered media once more. However, this time I was prepared. I delivered a concise statement, emphasizing justice being administered and expressing hope for other victims to find solace, standard remarks unlikely to cause future complications. Subsequently, I hopped into my car and drove aimlessly, eventually stopping at a coffee shop distant from home, ordering a drink with excess descriptors, then watched ordinary individuals lead ordinary lives from the window. Michael Santos contacted me some days later. He assured me that the watch store had undergone thorough investigation, new safeguards enacted, employees re-educated. He appeared ashamed and kept insisting his ignorance about Claire's actions, which I found believable. Often, offenders are more skillful in concealing than the innocent are in detecting. He proposed I advise on their revised security systems. My response was tentative. I haven't pursued it since, and I might not. Unexpectedly, Jenna contacted me as well. It seemed she too had been unaware of Claire's activities, having bought into the false narrative about lavish trips and spa outings for Jenna. She sobbed over the phone, expressed remorse for inadvertently serving as a decoy, inquired about my well-being. I assured her I was fine, though it was becoming habitual to respond that way even when it was far from the truth. She suggested a coffee meetup. I declined politely. Some relationships are best left disconnected. 8 months post-sentencing, I moved out, not due to necessity but choice. Legally, the house belonged to me following the divorce proceedings while Claire was incarcerated federally, yet it became uninhabitable for me as each room echoed with past memories and every piece of furniture held a story. The entire dwelling seemed possessed by the lingering spirit of a marriage that had expired months prior but continued to rot in the shadows. Instead, I moved into a compact apartment nearby, featuring one bedroom and sparse furnishings, providing little space for either physical or emotional luggage. Commencing anew, I also secured a job at a cybersecurity company, specializing in assisting victims of fraud secure their data. I employed my personal experiences during the interview, which they appreciated. My past, it seemed, made me an exceptional candidate for a fraud analyst position, especially when I had unwittingly fallen victim to my own wife's identity theft scheme. The card remains, albeit not in my possession physically. The actual card is kept as evidence, stored away in some federal storage facility. I retained a digital backup of each transaction detail, every alert screenshot, and the chronological record of my discovery, stored in a folder named Never Again on my laptop. During sleepless nights in the silent apartment, I open that folder for review. It's not about yearning for her or regretting my actions, but a reminder that those closest might be the least trustworthy. Claire sends me letters sporadically, which are forwarded by my lawyer due to my wish for no direct communication. She expresses remorse, offers explanations, and attempts to clarify her actions. I no longer read them. I glance through the initial ones before stopping. Her words can't alter anything. No reasoning would justify $200,000 fraud. No apology could erase a year of deception and systematic looting. The narrative became part of fraud prevention training programs. It's not my agreement that Michael Santos sought, but information about him can be found elsewhere. Authorities employ it as an educational resource, while security firms cite it in their publications. A blog post about it gained traction within cybersecurity communities and even went semi-viral. I, unfortunately, have achieved a form of internet notoriety that's less than flattering. My friends inquire if I'll date again, but I need time before I can consider it until trust no longer stirs unease in my stomach or looking at someone's smile doesn't evoke suspicions about hidden secrets. A therapist assists me weekly, discussing betrayal, trust issues, and rebuilding life after its foundation breaks. She listens without judgment and occasionally reminds me when I'm overly critical of myself. This occurs frequently. My sleep is better now, and my apartment seems less haunted by past events. The quiet is simply quietness, not the oppressive burden of deceit and concealed truths. Each morning begins with a glance at my phone, devoid of fraud alerts since the only swindler has been incarcerated in Fort Worth, serving his second year of a 6-year sentence. Reflecting thought. The one I revisit when seeking clarity amidst chaos. Claire believed London would reshape her life. She envisioned the premium airline tickets, the lavish hotel, and moments of feigned opulence would magically metamorphose her into the person she yearned to be. Her assumption about a life-altering experience was accurate. Only her prediction about its trajectory was flawed. London didn't usher in wealth and glamour for Claire. Instead, her pursuit of London with ill-gotten funds changed her residence from a peaceful suburban home to federal prison block C. The transformation remains, but the destination is vastly different. Isn't it ironic how that happens? I still retain the stolen credit card data, my testament to one of the most foolish yet stylish crimes I have ever traced. Occasionally, I gaze upon it and chuckle. Other times, I gaze upon it and feel sorrow. Primarily, I just gaze upon it and recollect that justice isn't always fulfilling. Truth isn't always soothing. Often, doing the right thing merely implies being the man who sent his wife to jail, a burden he must bear for eternity. Yet, at least I can sleep peacefully. And perhaps, in a federal prison somewhere in Texas, Claire too finds repose.